My name's Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic. And it's good to be here with you guys. It's good to be with you guys on Zoom. I see a lot of my friends there, people I know. See a lot of my Zoom friends here. That's good to see you. So, you know what, I'm in my 46 years of sobriety, and my first sponsor, Bob Sullivan, said, Russ, when a man with experience meets a man with money, the man with experience will walk away with the money, and the man with the money will have walked away with an experience. And I think what he was trying to tell me is, you may think you're smart, but you don't have the experience. You haven't been through the deal yet, But I got to tell you something. One of the things that happens after 46 years, and believe me, I still know but a little. God is slowly revealing after 46 years. You know how they say hindsight is 2020? I got a lot of hindsight. It's funny. Bill Wilson said in the Big Book, he has this line. Now remember, Bill Wilson wrote this when he was 3.5 years sober. Most of you guys in here probably have more time than Bill Wilson had when he wrote the Big Book. So I know it was divinely inspired, but this is what he says at 3.5 years sober. He says, here and there once in a while, a former drinker, the guy's in AA, but it's not really called AA. Between 35 and 39, it wasn't AA. They say AA started in 35. It didn't start in 35. This is just my opinion. I don't care. AA didn't start in 35. Something started in 35. It started when Dr. Bob met Bill Wilson, and then went on for 4 years after that. And the only book they used was the Holy Bible. That's what they worshiped, that's what they used. And the books they found absolutely essential were 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the book of James. And you couldn't go to a meeting unless you got down on your knees in front of everybody else in AA and gave your life to God. There's a fellowship that started. It broke away from the Oxford Movement, which is a first century Christian deal. Broke away, and that group started, and the books that they found absolutely essential were 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the book of James. And the book that they read all the time was the Bible. And Dr. Bob says, now listen, you can check this out. He said, what's AA all about? And he said, if you want to know what we're about, read the Holy Bible. And that fellowship started in 1935 and went to 1939. And they say in the Big Book, rarely have I seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And the path started in 1935 and 1939. Then what happened? This is what happened. You see, one thing, you see if you're an alcoholic, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. If you're an alcoholic, you can believe anything you want to believe. It makes you feel good. So then in 1939, Bill Wilson wrote the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they started a fellowship. And they named the fellowship Alcoholics Anonymous. They named it after the book, which was written in 1939. And they stopped, I don't want to say they stopped using the Bible because that went on for a while. And now AAs worship the Big Book. And you're not allowed to talk about the Bible. You're not allowed to talk about the Bible. They worship the Big Book. You understand? And that's a fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous. And problem is, you know what the problem? The problem is what happens when you get 46 years and you start actually thinking about this thing, what's actually going on here. Do you just shut up because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings? Is that what you do? What happens if that, that promise, have you guys read about that promise where it says we lose fear of other people's, we lose fear of other people? I know that you stop worrying about what other people think about you. What happens if you get time and you start realizing over the period of time, C.S. Lewis said in the 4 Quatrains, he said, we will not cease our exploration. And when we cease all our exploring, we will come back to the place where we began, having known the place for the first time. So what happens if you're like, let's say like me, your 46th year or your 30th year, or whatever the heck the year is, and you're doing all the AA stuff, and you're Mr. AA, and you're doing all that stuff, and you realize you're not happy. And you're sponsoring everything in sight, because nothing's so ensures sobriety than intensive work with alcoholics. And you know the big book backwards and forwards and the 12 and 12 and Dr. Bob and Goodall, you know all that stuff, but you're not happy with your sobriety. And so you're running around and doing everything, and some guy says to you, why don't you start going to a Bible study? This is my story. You know, by the way, AA says each alcoholic, in his own language and from his own point of view, talks about how he developed his relationship with God. So what happens if after 20 years of doing this thing, somebody points you in another direction and you start reading that stuff? What happens when you start believing in that stuff? What happens when you start hanging around people that believe in that stuff? And what happens where at the end of your exploration, you find yourself not looking at AA, but looking at the fellowship that developed between 1935 and 1939. What happens when the blinders come off and the scales come off? And and the dirty little secret that this is all about God. This is all about the central fact. What's your decision going to be? And you're going to meetings and you can talk about anything except God. Can't mention the Lord, can't answer the Bible. And all of a sudden, and here's the problem. Now you're not scared of what they think about you. Now, for the first 10 or 15 years, you're scared. You're not going to say anything. You want to blend. You don't want anybody criticizing you. You don't want one of these teenagers in AA coming up to you and saying you're killing newcomers. Or, hey, that crap they do. But what happens when you lose that fear? And you're sober 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Well, that's when you become dangerous. That's when you become dangerous. So here's the deal. So Bill Wilson, this is very interesting how this worked around. There's so much God involved here. When he was 3.5 years sober, he says now and then, once in a while, a former drinker. He wrote that book. He wrote this down before the big book of trouble. He's just saying this, what happened. You know, he's like prophesizing. He's like saying what, you know, every once in a while, a sober person, a physically sober person, says, feel better, look better, having a better time. I'm doing great. I love AA. AA is fantastic. Oh man, I love this fellowship. And then he says, where does he get this? Where do you get this? He says, when people do that, we laugh at them. That used to baffle me. I would think if I was sponsoring somebody and they'd say, feel better, look better, having a better time, you know what I mean? I'd say, man, that's exactly what we want to hear. We don't want to hear, oh man, I hate these meetings, you know, I hate this stuff. You know, we want to hear a guy like that. What happens when you hear guys like that over and over again and they all end up drinking? They get the girlfriend, they drink. They get the boyfriend, they drink. So he says, this is what he said. It's in your big book. You can check it out. It says, what does that mean? What, you know, when you see it happen over 46 years, it says, every once in a while, an alcoholic, a former drinker says, feel better, look better, have a better time. We laugh at such Sally. We know. Where does he get this? He had like 3.5 years. We know he's going to try the old game again. Absolutely. I feel like using the alcoholic phrase, you don't know me. I'm not like you. You got your program. I feel like using, how do you know? Well, he didn't know. He was just saying stuff. But it's in the book. It's in our Bible, the big book. He says, we know he's going to try the old game again because he's not happy with his sobriety. Now, it doesn't say when this is going to happen. It could happen in 10 years. It could happen in 20 years. It could happen in 40 years. And you know, when you have 46, what happens is you meet a lot of people. You don't meet them, but I mean, a lot of people with like 25 years, 30 years, 35 years, calling you up in a panic, calling you up sounding like a teenager, calling up sucking their thumb, calling up I don't know what to do. And so you get, I don't know how to explain to you, you have a different experience, you know, you see, your experience in A is everybody gets sober until the day they die, nobody drinks, and everybody's happy. You know what I mean? Bill Wilson at 3.5 years says, every once in a while you meet somebody who's sober, not drinking, and they become bad. We know they're going to become bad. We know he's going to try the old, because he's not happy with his sobriety. Soon he'll know loneliness as few do. He'll be at the jumping off place. He'll reach for he'll wish for the end. He'll go through a second bottom. How do you know that at 3.5 years? Now here's the cool part. The cool part is that 22 years sobriety, Bill Wilson went through that. He went through that. He wrote an essay called The Next Frontier, Emotional Sobriety. And he said, I went down the tubes. I had a depression for no apparent reason whatsoever. It came to me, and I didn't understand it because I wrote the book and I did all the stuff and I sponsor everybody and I'm doing everything. And I was a basket case. I almost died. And he said, and this is what he said. This is what he said at 22 years. Now, this has got to make you feel really good. If your fearless leader at 22 years, and you've been working at this thing, says, I got it all wrong. Like, when the fuck did you get it wrong, you know? I mean, when did that happen, you know? I got it all wrong. My real problem was dependency on people, places, things, and dependency on Alcoholics Anonymous. Took them 22 years to realize that AA was not the answer. I'm trying so hard to get kicked out of AA. I'm thinking that this frickin' meeting is going to do the trick. Think about that. Maybe I'll go in the Guinness Book of World Records. The only person to be kicked out of AA sober. You know? AA is not the answer. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. That's the answer. If a mere code of morals, if a better philosophy of life would have helped us, we would have been sober a long time ago. Didn't work for us. Therefore, we wrote a book because we had to find a power that would solve our problems. And then, of course, we had to talk about God. And then they say the problem is this bothered agnostics. So why do people in AA, why is the fellowship so bloody bothered about God, people? Talking in AA about God. Because most people in Alcoholics Anonymous, probably 90%, 80%, are not believers. They carry rabbit's foot. They're like rabbit foot. They're like lukewarm. They'll say they believe in God. They'll hold hands together. They'll do all that stuff. But really, in their heart is a dollar sign or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or a wife or a family or a car or a job. Their life revolves around shit, things. Even the fellowship can be an idol. You know, it revolves around that. And they all end up like Bill Wilson did, like I did at 10 years, sucking their thumb, because what happens when AA stops working? What happens when you could be sponsoring 1 million people and it doesn't work? Because the day will come where somebody won't call you up and you'll have an hour to yourself and you realize you want to blow your brains out. You'll become like Bill Wilson. You'll do that stuff. And let me tell you something. That is real shit. That's the real story of AA. And, you know, you go to a few conventions. You guys been to conventions? You ever do that? What's that thing where they stand up? What's that? Countdowns. Every once in a while they do it right. You know what I mean? And you ever go to one of those things where they stand up, you know, everybody have 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, you know, and they find out the guy with the least amount of time, and they say, okay, then they go up, just find the guy with the most amount of time, and you get to somewhere around 20 years. When does the drop-off start, you know? And then you see that between 20 and 40 years, there's like 7 people, you know, or, you know, I mean, like all of a sudden it's like you could shoot a shotgun, you're not going to hit anybody. There's like one guy with 45 years, you know, a guy with 30, one guy with 35. Where is everybody? Because very few people make it. And not only that, the people that stand, many of those are not happy with their sobriety. I'm just saying. So Bill Wilson says, this is what he says. This is Bill's words, so if you don't like it, you gotta blame him. Oh, you know what he said? By the way, he said, I knew what the answer is. For hours I stared at the St. Francis prayer. That was a prayer, by the way, that was written by a guy called St. Francis. By the way, Saint was not his first name. It's true. It's true. I don't know. Saint, they call him Saint because he was a Roman Catholic priest. And the God of his understanding that he committed himself to was Jesus Christ. And he stared at the prayer. It says, why can't I, and the prayer says, it says, what I have to become is somebody that's more interested in loving other people than being loved, understanding other people than being understood. Goes through this whole thing. How do you become that? How do you do that? And you know the only thing he wasn't doing? He wasn't looking at St. Francis. He wasn't looking at St. Francis. Because you become who you hang out with. Yeah, that's the deal. Didn't quite. You know, you don't have to invent your own God. You know, you become you hang out with certain people and you watch them. You say, I want what that guy has. And then you do what that guy does. It's not a freaking mystery. You understand what I'm saying? Not a mystery, you know, I mean. So he says, I wanted God. I needed God. This is our fearless leader, Bill Wilson. We had another leader, his name Bob Smith, but he was a born again Christian. He was a born believer. So there was another guy, that's Bob Smith. That's a whole other story. But anyway, so Bill says, I wanted God, I needed God, and he came. Remember that? That's in the hospital room when the wind came through the spiritual wind, so this is the God that preaches. And then he says, but soon, worldly clamors, you know what those are? That's the woman, the man, the romance, the sex, the black world, mostly within ourselves. Mostly within myself. Blocked out his presence. I started off on my knees on December 25th, 1980, on my knees. I thought my life was over, 31 years old, and I gave my life to the Lord. And I'm a Jewish kid from Great Neck, Long Island. It's like a Jewish ghetto. Because I was desperate. And 1 month later, 2 months later, I was in an AA room looking at the blonde in the front row. Yeah, you're laughing, you don't know what it's like. I was looking at the blonde. Denise, I'm worried about your husband. He's laughing too much. You know what I mean? I'm looking at the blonde in the front row. That's the deal. So I'm looking at that's how long. But soon, how soon was it? How soon was it for you when you took God and you flushed him down the frickin' toilet and you start looking at money, property, and prestige? Happens pretty quick, doesn't it? Really fast. A lot of people think that the steps will get rid of that. The steps won't get rid of that. I'm not even going to tell you what gets rid of that. I know some people can get rocketed into the fourth dimension existence, experience much of heaven, and I know some people can be somehow transformed by the Holy Spirit so that all they're interested in doing is loving other people and understanding other people and treating everybody like they have a broken heart, because they probably do, and they no longer chase. Maybe it's not perfect. I don't think they no longer chase the things of the world. The vacations aren't important anymore. I'm not my shoes. My clothes aren't important anymore. Whether you like me or not is not really important anymore. All I know is Bill Wilson, 3 months after he got sober, talked to Henrietta Seiberling. Listen, 1 month after he was sober, in Alcoholics Anonymous number 3, that was Bill Dotson, the man on the bed. he said to Bill Dotson, this is what he said to him. To Bill Dotson said, I was sober, but I knew there was something more, something I hadn't gotten. A sort of release, a happiness. I was trying to find out the answer. And I was sitting with Bill, myself and Henrietta, my wife. I was sitting with Bill. We're having lunch. And Bill turned to my wife and he said, Henrietta, this is what Bill said. Don't blame me, this is what Bill said. So if he said, he said, the Lord, you know who the Lord is, right? The Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease that I have to keep talking about it and telling other people about what the Lord has done. That's what Bill Wilson said. They call that in AA the golden text. They put a name on it. It's called the golden text. You with me? 1 month later, he's with Henrietta Seiberling and he's saying, I think we talk too much about God and religion. And Henrietta says to him, he says, the only reason you're sober is God. You got to stop worrying about pleasing alcoholics. You got to stop worrying about pleasing God. Because if you don't talk about God and what God's done for you, you might as well be the Rotary Club. Welcome to the Rotary Clubs. Because you know what's great about not talking about God or not listening to guys like me or any of that stuff is because then you can wallow in the worldly clamors. You can just talk about your sex problems, your romance problems. You can talk about your money problems. You can come to a place where you can whine like a thumb-sucking crybaby 2-year-old about all your problems and have everybody love on you and say, well, listen, you didn't drink, you're doing great. And you can feel like you're actually growing up when you're just a thumb-sucking crybaby. That's what the great thing about it. And you know what they say in the 12 and 12? They say this. They say one thing psychiatrists say about alcoholics is they have childish emotions. I went to a meeting yesterday. Every once in a while I go to regular meetings, Childish emotions. Childish emotions. A lot of upset people. Playing Alcoholics Anonymous. Playing games. See, I can say stuff like that because what are they going to do to me? Kick me out? What are they going to do? Kick me out. They don't like me. You're killing newcomers? No, maybe you're killing newcomers. Maybe you're killing newcomers. Like, where are they going to go? Where are the newcomers going to go? They go outside, they start drinking again, they come back in, crawling back in, and all of a sudden this isn't such a bad deal. Shouldn't you be lifting newcomers up? Why are you suppressing it? Why are you making it so, you read Dr. Bob's, how Dr. Bob, 12-step Clarence, the brewmaster. The first question, do you believe in God, young fella? He says, what does that have to do with it? Dr. Bob says, everything. Everything. Everything it's like a big deal. God is the central factor of your life. What is your decision going to be? There is no middle of the road solution. Half measures avail us nothing. Right? You don't change your mind and get the new idea, it's nil, zero. Your real reliance must be on God. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. I have a fellowship I crave now. I go to 3 meetings a day to a fellowship I crave. They're all alcoholics, and they all believe in God, and all we talk about, we don't even talk about drinking. We don't talk about drinking, we don't talk about drugging. Every once in a while we mention it, but it's not a big deal. Nobody's drinking or drugging or wants to drink or drug. All we talk about is God. All we do is talk about, that's the only thing we talk about, God. Nobody's drinking and drugging, nobody's got any pride, everybody's happy. That's the fellowship I crave. That's the fellowship I go to. Every once in a while they say, let's ask Russell to do a movie. And then I come in here and I do this stuff and they say, oh, maybe we made a mistake. What are you going to do? What are you going to do now? What are you going to do? Made a mistake, This guy's saying shit I've never heard before, We made a mistake. It's okay. It doesn't matter. Because here's the deal. We have the greatest police force in AA. It's called alcohol. Every 2 years, the alcohol comes through and wipes out all the horse shit. You know what I mean? All the wise guys, all the I won't bend the knee, all the, I do it my way, you do it. They all go to prison. They get wiped out. They get divorced. They go to the bank. They go nuts. It's like greatest thing in the world. Thank God for alcohol. Thank God for alcohol. Where would I be if it wasn't for alcohol? Home to work, home to work. I'd be living a life of quiet desperation. So what happened? So I used to, outline things, because I was worried about whether I'd make a mistake or something, whatever, when I didn't know anything. And so I brought this paper because I'm 77 years old and I've got like dementia. So my memory's really not good. So I want to read you something. And I want you to tell me what word. I'm going to read you some things. I want you to tell me what word am I defining? An individual whose sense of self-importance is overblown, pretentious, or unrealistic. You ever say anything like, or even think anything like, they don't know who they're dealing with. Do you know who I am? You have no idea. You know who you're dealing with? You know who you're talking to? You ever say that to yourself? I've said it to actual people, out loud. Do you know who I am? Have you ever said, what's your name? What's your name? If you're writing it down, you're going to get them in trouble. How about this one? You ever do this? Behavior, it's the same, that tries too hard to seem impressive, majestic, or important. Like name droppers and stuff like that. An unrealistic, inflated sense of superiority, power, knowledge, or self-worth. False beliefs that one possesses special fame or supreme power. Well, that's my form of alcoholism. You know what else they say the chief characteristic of alcoholics is defiance. You ever hear people say, well, you got your program, I got my program. You don't know me. You don't know me. I mean, alcoholics are fun to watch. You don't even know what alcoholism is until you get sober. They call you up and they ask you, I got a problem, can you help me? He says, sure. And then they start talking for about 10 or 15 minutes. They repeat themselves, and then 3 hours later, wow, there's more. And then you say, okay, you want the answer? He says, yeah. And you start talking, and before you get the second word out of your mouth, they say, no, you don't understand, there's more. There's more. They don't even let you, they call you up, make you believe they have a problem. Why don't you just say, I don't want you to say a frickin' thing. I just want to talk because I'm lonely and I want attention. And I'm only 3 years old, even though I look like I'm 50. Why don't they just say stuff like that, Then I'd understand. Just don't cut me off. Okay, so I just described a grandiose personality. That's what it's called, grandiose. I had never heard that word grandiose. Ever. Nobody in a bar ever said, I never heard the word grandiose until after I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. You know how I heard it? Because right after I gave my life to the Lord, and right after I picked up my white chip, right after I did all that, and I had like 30 days, 60 days, I picked up whatever the chips are, the red, some blue chip, some sort of chip, picked up a couple of chips, okay? Which I felt good. I had this great, you have the birthday party, they congratulate you and everything. My sponsor, for whatever reason, because he had like 20 years, and sometimes guys with 20 years, guys with a lot of time, 20, 15, can look at you and see something in you that they used to have. You understand? And it's clear to them. They see something in you that you do not see in yourself. And so he said to me, Russell, he says, you're grandiose. You're grandiose. Because I gave my life to the Lord, and then it was all about, then I took it back, and it's all about me. It's all about me. It happened like in a nanosecond. And went on for the next minimum 10 years. Sober. And I'm not saying it was all bad, sponsoring people, doing everything in AA, until I hit a second bottom in AA. An emotional bottom, like Bill Wilson did, emotional bottom. That's when the guy said to me, he says, maybe you ought to stop being Mr. AA, and maybe you ought to start doing that one thing that is the important thing. Find God now. Maybe you ought to make God the central factor of your life. When are you going to do that thing? Your real reliance has to be on God. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. See to it your relationship with him is great. Great events will happen for you and countless others. You'll meet us in the fellowship of the Spirit. When are you going to join the fellowship of the Spirit? Oh, I thought that was fellowship in AA. No, fellowship of AA is just a desire to stop drinking, not even you just want to stop drinking. You had a bad Saturday night or something. You're in the fellowship of AA. No, the fellowship of the Spirit is a different thing. People in the fellowship of the Spirit go to AA meetings, they talk about God. They pray to God. God is the central factor of your life. You're not in the fellowship of the Spirit. You're in the fellowship of alcoholics. That's the fellowship you're in, which is good. It'll work for 5 years, 10 years, something like that. But for most people, they fold after 5 years. We got people in here, I'm sure. It happened in every group. He says, I had 3 years and then I drank. I had 6 years and then I drank. I had 10 years. I got 15 years and he drank. If you ever talk to him, and I've talked to him, I was on Relay for 8 years. Every Friday night, anybody in day 10 had called up. They got me. I went through, you know what that is? That's 416 Friday nights where I'm talking to alcoholics on the phone, And you learn a lot about alcoholism, the alcoholic personality. When you do that, you just do. You really do. Especially when you're a grandiose bullshitter like myself, and you see, and you learn a lot about yourself. You really do. So my sponsor takes me to, I have a sponsor called Bob Sullivan, and he gave me a 24-hour book, which is a 24-hour book, which they don't read. They got rid of that. Too much God. 24-hour book, I don't even know about 24-hour book. It's divided up into 3 sections, and it combines the big book with the Holy Bible. It has quotes from the Holy Bible, and they used it for like 20 years. And then they came up with their, daily refractions or something, daily, whatever that crap is. But they got rid of that for 2 reasons. 2 reasons they got rid of it. The 24-hour book, too much God, too much Bible. And secondly, A, can make money. They don't make money over 24 hours. Hazelton bought it, so they stopped selling it because it wasn't conference approved. There's nothing conference disapproved, by the way. They didn't disapprove the Bible or anything, but they have conference approved because I'm all for, money's not important. It's right up there with oxygen. But we only sell conference approved shit here. You know what I mean? Stuff where, general services or whatever it is makes money. And I got all that sort of stuff. I'm so irreverent. It's terrible. It's horrible. Too bad it's the truth. But in any event, so in any event, so they got this book. He gave me this 24-hour book, and he said, I want you to get on your knees, read this every single day, and ask God's help to stay sober. And I don't really ever even remember him asking me whether I believe in God. I think you ought to ask somebody that, but I did it anyway for 15, 20 years. So he takes me to a meeting. I'm 3 months sober. So you're saying, what does this have to do with the second step? This is the only thing you know. The only thing you need to know is exactly what I'm saying. And I can say that because I'm fucking grandiose. You understand what I'm saying? But in a good way. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm going to tell you a couple things about alcoholics. I'm going to tell you one thing about alcoholics. Alcoholics like people to like them. They are scared shitless that people will reject them or talk about them behind their back. Your personality, if you're an alcoholic, is you are scared that people will reject you. I'm telling you, every alcoholic's like that. They may act like big shots and all, but they're scared that people will reject them. That's why you're always telling yourself that you don't care what other people think about you. That's why you say, I don't give a shit what he thinks about. I don't give a crap what they think about you. You get a couple of drinks and I can give a crap what they think about me. I'll show you, yeah. That's why alcoholics say that, to talk themselves into believing that they really don't care. But their whole life is, am I wearing the right shoes? Their whole life is spending money they don't have to buy shit they don't need to impress people they don't like. Their whole life is, what kind of car do I have? What kind of dress do I have? What color is my hair? Do I have a nice blouse? Do I have a nice suit? It's not just women, it's men. It's the whole life is about blending in and having people like them and look up to them. And that's the whole life of an alcoholic. That's the deal. So, number one, you got to understand that about alcoholism, and that'll kill you. It'll kill you, because alcoholics know intuitively that people don't like God people. You understand that they don't? They know that the fastest way to be rejected in this world, and especially in Alcoholics Anonymous, is to talk about God the way I'm talking about God. So what happens is, when you put somebody in a fellowship that's anti-God, they can give you this shit about their tolerance. It has nothing to do with tolerance. It really does. They say in the big book, they say alcoholics have mixed motives. Did you ever see that? To a certain extent, it's virtuous. It sounds virtuous. But somewhere, something behind this is the sickness. Is the worry about, I wonder what God will think about, what people will think about me. And man, I'll tell you, if you don't think that anti-God undercurrent, it doesn't exist in AA, you haven't been to enough meetings. God forbid you say God, you got to say higher power, or the great, whatever the heck you say, that kind of deal. So why is that important? So here's why it's important. So my sponsor takes me to a meeting. I'm 4 months sober. There's a guy talking at the meeting, his name's Al Kennedy. I don't know crap. I know I love AA. I'm in that stage. AA is great. I'm listening to this guy, Al Kennedy. He's incredible. He's like 75 years. He's like my age. And he's talking, I don't know if he's talking like I'm talking, but I mean, it's almost like he's talking like, it's like he's, like when I would get up and I'd be nervous. It was like this guy was like, he was so genuine. He was so transparent. And this guy was the most comfortable. He was like a man's man, comfortable. He's in his 70s. And everybody was so attracted to him. He had such great things. I can't even remember a word he said. He was incredible. And he was so good. When he was done, he left. I asked my sponsor, I said, what's his homeroom? I want to hang out with that guy. Because he was attracted. I wanted what he had. And my sponsor says this, you ready? He looks, now imagine if this was you. You heard somebody talking and everything like that. He says this. I said, what group, what's his homeroom? What group does he hang out with? And he says, well, he's dying. You understand? You said, what home group is this? He's dying. So I thought maybe you didn't understand me, you didn't hear me. I said, no, you don't understand. I want to know what home group. He says, he's dying. I said, what do you mean he's dying? He says, he's dying. He's got terminal cancer. He's got like 6 months to live. Now, I don't know whether anybody in that entire group, this is what I don't know, ever even knew that or heard that, but I heard that. That was for me. I heard that. So I'm sitting there. And I say to him, the first thing I said is, he didn't say anything about dying. He says, I know. He was just trying to help people. I said, I know. He seemed happy. He said, I know. I said, but he's dying. He's got terminal. 6 months later out, and he was dead. He died. Let me tell you how much that impressed me. I've been telling that story for 45 years. I may forget the one thing I never forgot, because I said to myself, I thought this was about not drinking. I didn't know this was about not being scared to death. I wanted Al Kennedy sobriety. I wanted Al Kennedy sobriety. You know how you get Al Kennedy sobriety? You find yourself some Al Kennedys. You find your ass some Al Kennedys. And you hang out with Al Kennedys. Now here's what happens. All my sponsors were Al Kennedys. All my sponsors were not only Al Kennedys, their friends were Al Kennedys. You understand what I'm saying? Their friends were Al Kennedys. I hung out with Al Kennedys. You understand? When you want people to like you, when you want to blend, when you don't want people to reject you, and you decide to hang out with a group of Al Kennedys, you know what I mean? Who are tough, you know what I mean? They say nasty things to you. They say, I'm not even going to go through, that's for another time, maybe a 12-step. The stuff they used to say to me, you know, when I would be talking to somebody about somebody else, he'd say, Russell, this is AA. We never say anything bad about anybody behind their back. So, I mean, if you want to say something bad to somebody, you go up to their face and you talk to them about it, but you don't say anything. He says, so the next time you feel like saying something bad about somebody or gossiping, why don't you just shut the fuck up? You go out and get a drink. And he said that to me in front of 4 people. And I had like 3 months. And I wanted to kill him. I wanted to kill his dog, rape his wife, and everything like that. But I loved the guy, and I knew I was sober because of him. And so you know what happened? I stopped talking about other people behind their back. I became, by the way, the AA monitor of people talking about other. Yay, we don't do that in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know what? Because I wanted them to respect me, and I wanted them to like me. Now, let me tell you something. Here's the deal. The men I hung out with, I don't know whether you'll understand this, and I'm not saying this because I think you will understand it, but I'm just going to tell you this. The men I hung out with in AA, who had 25, 30, 35, 40, 50, you know, that kind of time, when they said that guy is sober, that gal's sober, to them sobriety was not drinking. They didn't refer to people who were not drinking as sober. When they said that guy is sober, they were talking about a whole different deal. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, many times it was pretty clear to me that their standard of being sober was more than just not drinking. It was something else. I can't tell you what it is. Their idea of sober was Al Kennedy. Al Kennedy was a sober man. You know? That's what was sober to them. Their idea of sober was a Bob Smith. Their idea of sober was the first 4 years of Alcoholics Anonymous. Their idea of sober was not hanging around meetings complaining, or not talking about God, or not getting serious about it. Their idea is about being sincere and serious about this stuff. You cannot hang out with people. You're gonna meet thousands of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, they say in step 7, unless you develop some humility, you'll never get sober. You'll never stop drinking. But unless you acquire much more of this precious quality of humility, you'll never be truly happy. It's one thing to pick up a white chip. It's one thing to ask somebody to sponsor you. You got to have some humility to that. It's very tough for an alcoholic to go up to another person saying, "Will you help me? Will you sponsor?" It's one thing to go to an AA meeting. It's very difficult to walk. But I think most people get enough humility where they'll actually go to a meeting, where they'll actually pick up a white chip, where they'll actually ask someone to sponsor them. Some people even have enough humility where if they say, read this 24-hour book every day, they'll get on and still do that. They'll do it. They'll do what they're told. Other people, just either won't get a sponsor or they won't do what they're told anyway. You know what I mean? To get humility, or whatever it is you have to get to bend your knee to God and make God the central factor of your life and talk about it and make him the central factor of your life, that's a whole different deal. That's a whole different deal. That's probably about it. So I'm going to tell you a fast story. I know you're dying to pass that around. Pass the bag. I'm going to tell you a fast story. Fast story. I can do it before the bewitching hour. So I went to a Bible study. I've been going to a certain Bible study for 20 years. I don't go to it anymore. I go to something else. And the guy who was giving the Bible study told a story. And this is the story he told me. And it's a true story. I heard this at a Bible study. It's a true story. And this story is all about who's going to make it. This story is all about who's going to make it and who's not going to make it. And you want to know who's going to make it and who's not going to make it? I'm going to tell you a story. You can blow it away. And he told this story, and I said, holy crap, that's Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the secret. And this is a true story. In the 1860s, around the Civil War, you guys have probably heard about the California Gold Rush. In the 1860s, during the Civil War, there was this huge finding of silver and gold in the Midwest, northern around Bannon, Montana. Have you ever watched the TV show Bonanza? That was about that. It was Bannon, Montana. They found this huge strike gold. Now that was found in the Black Hills. The Crows, they had the reservation up there. White men were supposed to go up there, but all these guys went there, and all these miners, all the drunks from the East Coast came to Bannon, Montana, and they were looking for gold. Okay, you can look this up. I used to memorize the guys' names that were involved. There was Henry Fairweather and some other guy, and 7 miners took off from Bannon, Montana, to go to follow. There were about 300 to follow the miners up to strike gold, do all that sort of stuff, and they got captured by the Crow Indians. It's a true story. Got captured by the Crow Indians, and the Crow Indian, and they finally they escaped, except for one guy who was like a half-breed or something. He stayed with them, but they escaped. 6 of them escaped, and they were going back to Bannon, Montana. You with me? And when they were going back to Bannon, they stopped at a place called Grasshopper Creek. Look up Grasshopper Creek, Bannon, Montana, gold and everything. Just look it up on the internet. You'll see all the guys' names and everything. And they stopped at Bannon, Grasshopper Creek. And while they were sitting there, some guy named Alden or something, it might have been Fairweather, started hitting at some rim rock. Now I don't even know what rim rock is, but I know that's what it said in the thing, hitting on rim rock. And he found all this gold. And when they came back, they actually found all this gold. I mean, they found a lot of gold right there, so they knew it was a big strike. But what happens with big strikes, in order to keep it, you got to work the claim, because they had claim jumpers and everything like that, and you had to follow. So they made this pact in blood, and their pact was they were going to go back to Bannon, they were going to get all the tools they made, and they were going to come back. You understand what I'm saying? And they were going to work the mines, and the deal was nobody says a word to anybody. They're going to Bannon late at night, they get all the tools and everything, and they're going to meet at the old oak tree, and as they're going to the old, there's 300 miners following them. 300 miners following them, And Fairweather knew, he said, somebody spilled the beans. So he goes up to the leader, and he goes up and he says, who talked? He said, nobody talked. He said, nobody talked. He said, nobody talked. He says, how'd you know? And this is what they said. You ready for this? He said, we could see it in your eyes. We could see it in your eyes. We knew you had hit the mother lode. They were so excited. They couldn't hide. There was no way. It's like you just won $5 million. Don't walk in the store. Don't tell anybody. We knew you had hit the mother lode. So you're going to be an A, you're going to be a lot of people. You're going to need a lot of complainers, a lot of whiners. You're going to need some bleeding deacons. You're going to need a whole bunch of stuff over there. And then one day you're going to meet an Al Kennedy. You're going to look in his eyes and say, I don't know what that guy's got, but he hit the mother lode. There's something going on. It's like, Alcoholics Anonymous number 3 said, he said, I knew there was something more, something I had got. When Bill Wilson was on fire, you knew it had hit the mother lode. And you start hanging around with those people that have hit the mother lode, I guarantee you, those people, they're not going to have any problem with the God thing. They're going to be focused on God. You know what I mean? You hang around those people, you don't have to know shit. you will automatically, over a period of time, like osmosis, become them. You go the other way, the broad highway where most people go in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to have a rabbit's foot God. It's going to be like carrying around a rabbit's foot. You with me? That's the way it works. It's real simple. It's not complicated. You can be smart as shit on the big book and everything like that. It's who you hang out with, who you're attracted to. It says in the big book, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready. You're not even ready unless who's your we? Who's your we? Who's your we? Okay, thank you.